old back then.
What?
Or does not. Part of this presentation,
Here you go, David. Right here. I warmed up for you.
I'll call this to order. And I will turn the discussion of Kids on the Block over to Susan. Welcome. And you've got two shady guys sitting next to you. I don't know
I know.
what that's all about.
Things look a little different up here at the staff table tonight. So thank you, Mayor. I'm Susan Muir, the Parks and Rec Director, and I want to make a couple of introductions tonight. We're here tonight to talk to you about the Kids on the Block After School program, and that's one of 6 programs in the Parks and Rec Department. And Janet Adams, who is here at the table to participate in the conversation, is the manager of that program and has been with the city city for many, many years and is our resident expert on after-school programming. So we really appreciate the work that she's put into this. I also want to mention that there are a few people in the audience that were on what we called the KOB TAC, the Kids on the Block Technical Advisory Committee. Dale Tomlinson is here, who many of you know and was one of the founders of KOB. We called him a KOB stakeholder. Jennifer Goodling is here tonight. She was one of our parent representatives on the committee and was very helpful. And of course, Kathy Kolash is here tonight, who has been a liaison with us for the school district for both some of the KOB TAC meetings, but also a good resource for us, and participated in monthly meetings, I think, throughout the school year as we were going through this process. So we appreciate that. I think that is the TAC that is here, with the exception of the two counselors that are here at the table. As you know, Counselor Garvin and Counselor Geary were on the Technical Advisory Committee as well, right here. Before I do the PowerPoint slides, I want to just mention there's been a couple of aha moments for me and for the participants in these discussions. And I want to make sure everybody knows that in Parks and Rec, we offer a huge number of programs in the hours that are after school. We offer programs on gymnastics. We offer programs in cheerleading, ballet, basketball, musical theater, painting, kids Zumba. We offer superhero workshops. We offer programs on days when there are no school, laser tag and dodgeball classes, and basketball and team sports. So we offer a lot of programs that happen in those after school hours. And we operate an after school program which operates from 2:30 to 5:30 every day at the school sites, which is known as Kids on the Block. And so we touch hundreds of kids across the community in both of those programs. Right now we know we touch 300 a year in Kids on the Block, and we touch hundreds in those other programs. So I just wanted to outline that there are many what people consider after-school programs happening through Parks and Rec, but tonight we're talking about Kids on the Block, which is the 5-day-a-week, 2:30 to 5:30 program. I'm not sure. Thank you. Okay, so where have we been? This is just a quick review of what we had when we had the Oregon Ask consultant come make a final presentation to you. As you know, this is a 30-year, very successful program in McMinnville. A lot of participation, a lot of community pride in this program that we have. It's also had some diverse funding situations involved in it. We have funding from fees. We've had grants on and off that have been in partnership with the school district. And more recently, we've had some changes in the fundraising framework that you all know about through the Mayor's Ball. In September of 2018, knowing that fundraising framework was really changing, we hired Oregon Ask to apply best management practices to our program and look at the fees and look at the financial structure and look at our staffing. They really looked at all aspects of the program and used a huge community involvement process. They used 5 different methods for community engagement and involvement, and came and did a work session with you all to scope your ideas about after school, and then came back in March of 2019 and presented their final presentation. And you may remember they had 49 recommendations in their presentation back in March. So at the March work session, we committed to launching a technical advisory committee that would look at the primary mission and vision questions that Oregon Ask suggested, and that group met 5 times from March to July. And just to recap what the Oregon Ask assessment sort of big picture takeaway was, several of us had different aha moments as part of that, but for me, I remember Susan Zundell saying, KOB is a good program and some are being left behind, which, as you know, those of you who've been around the KOB program, was actually the opposite of what we were trying to do with it. And so we knew we had some work to do, and the Technical Advisory Committee and Janet and I have all rolled up our sleeves and really tried to figure that out. We also knew we hadn't checked in with you all a lot on the policy direction, but we did know that one of the ongoing mantras of the program was to keep the fees low. And you'll remember when we had Dan Eds here presenting about Parks and Rec fees, keeping fees artificially low is not a good or sustainable way to run a Parks and Rec program. So we had several kind of eye-opening moments as we were going through this about how we can improve the program and really think about it long-term going forward. Okay, so the TAC was advisory to me. They were mostly technical representatives after the broad public engagement part of the Oregon Ask assessment. And like I said, we started with the vision and mission. I really want to thank the volunteers who helped with the KOB TAC. They did a great job. The Oregon Ask assessment outlined 3 primary questions because they said you're at a crossroads. You need to figure out what you're going to be and who you're going to serve and what it's going to look like. And they gave us 3 questions to look at. And this is what we put in front of the TAC at the first couple of meetings. What are the desired outcomes of the program? Why is the city of McMinnville government invested or involved in after-school programming? And what is the rationale for public investment? So we started through that and really thinking about what the next 30 years might look like. So this is an example, just to, we did there were a lot of dot exercises, a lot of chart pack going through each of these meetings. And when we got to the outcomes, we grouped them under the categories that were in the Oregon Ask assessment tool. So those were participant outreach and customer service, operational, staffing, partnerships, and financial. And so for participant and outreach and customer service, we knew we wanted to match the school year. You may recall that we don't actually conduct the after-school program on every day school day, and that was something that Oregon Ask was like, we've never really seen that before. It's supposed to be operating in every day of the school. That's the reason for it. Adding kindergarten was important both to the technical advisory committee and through the assessment program. We have an issue with waiting lists. We wanted to make sure we got rid of those and had no waiting lists as part of the program. We wanted to make sure that we had trained staff. We really talked a lot about partnerships with both Linfield, Schmeketa, the school district, private businesses, making sure that we're open to those kinds of things and seeking those partnerships. We've had some feedback about registration and how difficult it is online and kind of the unknown. Do people even know when it happens? Do people know when it opens? Do they know the requirements? We've had a lot of comments about that. And then making the financial aid program really clear and transparent, and having that financial aid program really focus on those that are most financially vulnerable in our community. Under the operational category, it was important to the committee to make sure that the community had choice, that there was some options for them. Right now, there are very little in McMinnville. We have a few private providers, a few ecumenical providers, and us, and then there are in-home care center or child care or after-school programs that operate at a small number out of homes. But there's not a lot of choice for people in our community. And as it's grown, I think that's become even less so, that there's choice because there's fewer slots, even in the one option, which is ours, Kids on the Block. We wanted to make sure that we have high quality enrichment. Enrichment is a word that has been around this program for a long time, and we want to make sure we're doing that. And we also want to make sure that we align with the school day, which is important for us to think about as we do the programming for the after-school program. And then we also wanted to make sure we were checking in with the community needs and engagement on things like programming. So one of the things that I think Janet and I discovered through this is we didn't do a great job of communicating what types of programs we do run on the Kids on the Block and the purpose of them. So as an example, everybody knows we have Reptile Man come in, but they don't know what kids learn through Reptile Man and how we attach the Reptile Man to lessons about nature and caring for pets and a whole bunch of other things. And so we knew we needed to do a better job of engaging the community on those types of aspects of our program. We definitely want high quality staffing who are able and qualified to work with kids, including all kids, and we talked a lot about inclusivity and breaking down barriers. And then again, we talked about the partnerships and making sure that we are getting the best information we can to be the best staff for these kids that are in the program. And then the financial piece, which really was the driving force between the assessment, is making sure that we're being fair with it, making sure that we are increasing the fees. And you'll recall that you all said, go ahead with step 1 of what the Oregon Ask assessment was and increase the fees for this school year, which we did. And then also looking at the increased cost recovery and being self-sufficient and looking at the long-term sustainability financially for the program. So those are the outcomes and the themes that the KOB TAC looked at first. And we kind of bounced back and forth between looking at themes and outcomes and doing some wordsmithing on the mission and vision. And the second question that we asked is, why is the city involved? And these bullet points here are directly from the conversation that the TAC had. We identified that after-school program is a value to the community. It's a perk for employers as we're trying to lure them in. We can say we've got a quality after-school program. There's been historic mayor and city manager support for the Kids on the Block program. Overall, there is a good argument that there are cost savings as kids are kept off the street and have something good and productive to do. There was a thought that there were some savings on personnel costs if the city administered this program over other providers. We know that keeping kids engaged and good, strong community members can lead to less crime and vandalism in your community. It's a good economic development tool. It's a quality program and has been for the life of the program, that it assures that we have access and services for all. And then youth development is an important part of any Parks and Rec program. The interesting thing about this question, as we kind of talked about it, is I'm not sure, other than the third bullet, these really get at why the city is providing the services. And so that's something that I still think we can talk about a little bit, and we'll do that on as we start talking about the work plan. But these are all obviously very important things for any after-school program and very important things for a community to have as part of the quality of life and the offerings that they have for their community members. So, went back to brainstorming the vision and mission. We started out by following the same pattern as MacTown 2032, so that we would use the same definitions and make sure that it all nestled in with each other. And we did that. We asked ourselves, what will people say about KOB 30 years from now? And then, as I mentioned, everybody loves dots, and we did some prioritizing as part of that. The exercise that's shown here in the photo, that was what will people be saying in 30 years for that, and there's the example of the reptile man. You know, I am a wildlife biologist because of the reptile man. And these are things that go above and beyond what we might expect to hear today about Kids on the Block, but it was a good opportunity for us to say, what do we want to be as part of the future? If you guys have anything, just chime in whenever if I'm missing anything. So as part of that, the task asked us, staff, and more specifically the school district representative, to go to the school district leadership with a draft mission and vision that we were crafting over the 5 meetings. Based on their feedback on what the committee was doing, it was clear that there were a few areas where we were thinking in parallel and not necessarily intersecting and having a commonality about what we wanted to do. And we boiled those down to whether or not the program serves city residents or McMinnville School District residents. And those two maps, those 2 layers on our GIS maps don't, they align. City of McMinnville is smaller than the school district boundary, obviously. So we talked about that with Washer. Washer is one of those areas where we serve students and families that live outside the city of McMinnville city limits. We subsidize Kids on the Block with a $40,000 general fund contribution. We need to go talk to the city of Lafayette and work on that. But that's something that it's apparent through the conversations that the city has the perspective of those dollars should go to city residents, and the school district really wants this after-school program to serve all McMinnville School District residents. So that was the first place we talked about. There was also some conversation about whether or not we have the program really focus on all families in our community or specifically at-risk populations. I would say the committee really felt strongly that the program needed to be representative of the entire fabric of our community. So not looking at targeting one income level or certain neighborhoods, but looking at the whole population so that it's got a breadth and a depth and diversity in it, rather than looking at, I think at one meeting, somebody said, we don't want this to be looked at as a low income after-school program. We want it to be a quality after-school program for everybody. And so that was one of the places where the city and the school district, are we looking at all families or at-risk population? And I think historically, the idea has been that we should be looking at at-risk populations from the school district's perspective. So the third place where it seemed like we were in parallel and not intersecting was whether this was financially sustainable through cost recovery and scholarships, or whether or not the city should commit to fundraising and continuing that fundraising piece, which, as you know, filled a big void and kept those fees very, very low for everybody that was involved in it. The school district wanted the city to commit to fundraising long-term as part of the financial structure of this. We've been, as a city manager, myself as a city program manager, we've been looking at how do we maintain this program in a long-term sustainable way through aggressive cost recovery and aggressive scholarshiping to make sure that the scholarshiping is targeted on those people truly in need. Okay, so the proposed vision that the committee ended up with is here on the screen. It says, we want to have the vision be all elementary school kids have access to an after-school program that provides opportunities to be engaged learners and confident community members. So this went through a number of different wordsmithing. We really, I think we locked in at the last minute on this wording and felt comfortable that this was where we wanted to go as a big picture for the vision. And then I'll give you the mission, and then we'll talk about the work plan associated with that. So the mission was, we serve families through a quality, sustainable, equitable, accessible enrichment after-school program that promotes intellectual, creative, and healthy development. So those were the final recommendation to me from the Technical Advisory Committee. I actually didn't change it at all, bringing this recommendation forward to you. I think they did a great job of sorting through those policy questions in here and making sure that we were serving the full community and what we wanted that to be. So the other thing that the committee did was look at our work program and priorities, and we looked at the other 49, so 48, I guess, recommendations from the Oregon Ask Assessment, and we developed short-term and long-term goals. And some of the short-term goals, due to the nature of the calendar and the school year, are actually off and running on some of these, which has been going pretty well. But at the time the committee was developing these for us, we were starting to frame them for the school year. And then we have the long-term work plan item. So I mentioned we increased the fees from $625 to $775. We've had a little bit of feedback about that, but we expected a lot more. Not much in that, and that big of a jump. And we structured the financial, what we basically would be a scholarshiping or financial aid package to be much more structured, much more transparent. And we worked with the school district and each principal to really allocate those in a way that made sense to them. So we were partners in making these decisions. And these are on page 4 of your staff report in a little bit more detail. So we have,
And in context, even with the fee increase, we're still like 60% of the next budget.
thank you for that, yeah. So in looking at the Oregon Ask assessment, we're still way below market in terms of what we're charging at the $775. And we still have a lot more to go, but that was the first step that they recommended, and we'll need to do a lot more on that. So looking at page 4, which is this short-term, we have done the registration and scholarship information in both Spanish and English for this school year. So we got that out, worked with the school district on delivering that to those families that might need the communication. It was more targeted communication than it has been in the past. We didn't just use the guide, but Janet worked closely with the school district on that kind of getting that information out. And then we're committed to 3 program-wide family communications in Spanish and English for 1920. And that's where we'll use the tool of letting them know what we're doing for programming and ask them if there's anything missing in the program that they'd like to see. So engaging them more and letting them know what we're offering and what their kids are experiencing during the school, and then asking them for feedback about what would they like to see. So we're committing to doing that, and that was what the Technical Advisory Committee prioritized for us.
Can I ask a question? So on this application process for scholarships, acknowledging, so there's an English and a Spanish version, but I have a concern, correct me if I'm wrong, are families being asked to submit their tax returns as part of that application process?
There's a couple of different programs that we have. I'll let Janet explain what each of them are.
Okay, I would just want to say that I fear that that would be an obstacle for a lot of families for various reasons, and families living in poverty as well, so.
In lieu of that, they can also submit some sort of documentation that shows that their child participates in SNAP or TANF or SSI. That was one of the suggestions of the school district, was rather than asking for something like a tax document, accept information from DHS that shows the families participating in a social support program like that.
Okay, and then is that clear in the application process?
Yes. Do folks still not necessarily understand?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm discovering that that is the case. The majority of people that submitted
And then what about, I know historically, school districts just kind of been able to contact you and say like, this kid needs to be in KOB, and then you just make it happen. So one of my fears that came up in the last time we spoke is that we would kind of be losing that element of being able to push somebody into a spot when it's really needed.
Actually, I would say it's just the opposite.
Okay,
We have 98 total scholarship slots available. 27 of those slots are scholarships that the city administered through the applications that came in. The rest of them are all being allocated by school district, particularly school principals. They know that they have either $500 scholarships to give out or $775 full fee scholarships to give out. It's a very clear number. It's more than they've had in the past. And they're just now starting back to school, and I've been receiving the requests from principals already about which students they want to put into those slots.
okay, all right,
And
I'm sorry.
for those, the school district administered ones, there is no requirement of paperwork.
Oh, great.
That really is someone who's a principal or a counselor who says, this kid needs it. Let's clear the speed bumps and get this kid in.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't go into too many details on that, but thank you for raising some of those questions. We did sit down with all of the principals, I think it was all of the principals before we issued this, and went through how do we want to allocate these slots with them. I think that was quite a change. Would that be fair to say, Janet, about how we allocated both the scholarship slots and the slots across the schools? So that was part of our attempt to work in close partnership and make sure that we're making thoughtful decisions, because as you know, it used to be first come, first serve. So what we did, and we have certain first come, first serve slots this year, but we also held back those scholarship slots that Janet just walked you through purposely before we started this year. So it was more deliberate, more clear and transparent, and we tried to put more structure to it. There's still work to do.
Always.
Yeah. Okay, so we got the administration of this scholarship, and that relates both to the financial plan and the communication plan, really, and the way we communicated that. On the financial plan, we are going, as I mentioned, we solidified the scholarship program. We'll have some discussions with Washer. We think this will deliver increased revenue for us this year. Verify the scholarship program. We'll also, test and see how that worked this year. And perhaps raise some revenue, not this fiscal year, but next year, if the city of Lafayette wants to participate with us, if that's the way we go. The other short-term recommendations, we committed to increasing the days KOB is offered, getting closer in alignment with a number of school days. So that means this year we've committed to bridging what's known as the Jan term break for Linfield students, which we traditionally did not offer KOB during that because a huge amount of our employees left or were not available during that. And we've committed to finding a way and figuring out how to bridge that gap this year, and we'll continue to try and add more days through the year. But that seemed to be the one, and Janet really had more experience with this, that seemed to shock families the most because it's unexpected if you don't know what the Linfield schedule is. So we're committed to bridging that gap this year. And then providing options, information, and evaluation tools for the enrichment program. That'll also be worked into those 3 communications that we're committed to with the families over the year. And just really upping our game with communication with the family and the school district and how we're doing on that. And as I mentioned, we really worked with the school district on how we allocate those slots and scholarships across the schools. So those are the short-term goals for us. And then the long-term plan is really an important piece too. And this is something, as we were going through thinking about the financial plan, and this came up during the Oregon Ask assessment as well, is how do we get more capacity for after-school slots in McMinnville and make sure that we have variety and that we are meeting the needs of our community? Because right now we know we're not. The waiting list, I don't know if Janet, if you have off the top of your head how many people we have on the waiting list for this school year-ish. Almost 100 families on this year's waiting list. So we know we need more slots in the city of McMinnville. We know the technical advisory committee said we want to make sure that there are options for families. We know we have some limitations on hiring and other things that prevent us from just saying we can serve all of those 100 kids right now, and that compounds our financial situation as well. So one of the long-term programs that we discussed with the technical advisory committee was to work with the school district in close partnership and explore additional options and service providers who may enhance McMinnville's after-school service. So what that might look like is a request for information or a request for proposals for after-school service providers, and inviting people in to tell us what it would look like what it would take to bring them here, or what it might look like if they were able to come here. And then also have discussions with our other current operators in the city of McMinnville, faith-based or otherwise, and see what we can do to help build capacity in those local providers that are currently operating. And then there may be other ways too that we can look for expanding capacity in the after-school program, where the city can't necessarily fill all of those gaps and be everything to everybody. Because I think that's one thing we learned through the Oregon Ask assessment. Without the policy guidance and the clear vision and mission of what we're expected to be, everybody thought we were everything to everybody. And some people thought we were operating in one way, some people thought we were operating in another, and it was, we tried as best we could to meet all of those demands of the community over the 30 years of the program, and I think we spread ourselves a little thin and relied on the fundraising to be really the way we finance the program. So those are the vision and the mission, the short-term and long-term goals that the Technical Advisory Committee worked on. We have a recommendation in the staff report for you all to approve the attached vision and mission for the after-school program, and then to request a joint meeting with the McMinnville School District Board to check in and review the assessment program in partnership with this current framework on it.
Any questions?
Have we explored some of the other fundraising methods, or have you explored some other fundraising methods, so even just some basic things instead of like trying to recreate the mayor's ball or something grand like that, doing like a GoFundMe campaign that residents could get behind? And
I think the challenge with that, Remy, is the sustainability of it. So, you could get a year or two out of a GoFundMe campaign, but could you sustain 30 years out of a GoFundMe campaign, going out every year for that? And then if you look at the long term of possibly going out for RFPs, and then you look at that slide of why McMinnville, why is the city involved? I think if you go back a decade when we looked at that with the EMS service of why McMinnville's involved in that, we don't have a private provider, is because we like to do things the McMinnville way, and we like to have control and be able to change a program if it needs changed. And so I would say, us going out for RFPs isn't a unanimous ask of all TAC members, but I think it definitely held the majority of, to put all the information on the table, and for us as a council, and to be able to look at what does it look like if McMinnville is involved for the next 30 years, or what does it look like if maybe a secondary provider comes in and KOB stays on, the city provides service, or what does it look like if it's all privatized?
do you worry that we lose sight of the mission if you put KOB in the hands of an outside provider?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern of the TAC, certainly.
It's a concern for me as well.
I'm wondering, have you considered, and I know I brought this up in another area, but of actually forming some kind of a charitable foundation or something like that, where people, alumni and stuff could give to the program and provide at least some funding that way? It might, and also ask for testamentary type gifts and things like that would really expand the program, at least occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a couple things related to that. More related to the work session that we had on Parks and Rec fees. We are setting up a easy donation webpage where you don't have to register through ActiveNet, but you can go on and donate money and make it a little bit more user-friendly than somebody having to figure out where they mail a check, which we do get small checks in the mail from folks wanting to do scholarships or other things. So we're looking at that. I think the lesson we learned through the last few years of the Mayor's Ball was doing something that was very proactive, took the time away from actually managing the program with the amount of resources that we have. So it's kind of a catch-22. Do you fund the fundraiser? Do you fund the program? And it really took a toll on the program. And we are looking at other revenue sources. One of the things that came, one of the 49 recommendations in the Oregon Ask Assessment was to look at a federal program called ERDC. Jan's gone to a couple of meetings and done some research on that and talked to a couple of other providers in the region that do offer that, and we're exploring that. But with that comes additional administration and requirements that some providers have told us it doesn't make it worth it for us to do it. It makes it worth it. It's easier for us to just get the kids in at whatever cost the families can pay rather than work through the reimbursement process of ERDC. So we're doing all of those things, and we intend to keep working through those 49 recommendations at the same time as we're looking at the short-term and long-term solutions. I don't know what may happen if we go solicit and put the vision and the mission out there and say, this is what we're looking for, who can come give us some additional capacity in McMinnville. We don't yet know what we'll get back. We might get a lot of interest, we might get no interest, but I think, not to take words from Councilor Geary, he said it at one meeting, we just want the opportunity to ask the same question now that we asked 30 years ago when KOB was started. Are we the right ones to be doing it? Is this the right format? And does this make the most sense for our community?
Could I ask one further question real quick, like unless Councilor Geary wants to talk?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just curious on the communication piece. I understand, you know, the getting it out in the Spanish language and things like that. But what else are you planning to do to beef up communications?
We are going to be putting out 3 bilingual communications during the school year to let folks know what activities are coming up, where and when they have options, so that they can give feedback to the program. And those will be coming out at quarterly, October and January, spring.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm just curious.
And I'll chime in. So I have that same gut reaction every time we bring that question up. If we let it go, it's gone, potentially. And that's my gut reaction, but I also think that that's a nostalgia-fueled reaction, and perhaps that isn't the most productive. If I take a step back and think, we've committed to funding X amount for a program that provides this opportunity for kids in our community, full stop. And we've 30 years ago created this program. We're trying to figure out how to continue on now. If we have the same opportunity to cut, you know, this check to fund this program in our community, the end result should be getting as many kids as we can in there. And, you know, we talk about, should we focus on all kids or should we focus on at-risk kids? We don't have the purchasing power to focus on anyone yet. When we get to that point, great, but we don't. So let's just, I mean, if we can choose between one or the other, that certainly is a filter we will enact, but we're trying to get as many kids as we can in. And if this opportunity provides us that, then I think that is something we should explore.
Why would the goal be to get as many kids as possible over to get the most at-risk kids? Because, I mean, it's a huge safety net for the city in all ways.
I think the more much like a larger body making decisions, theoretically, in my opinion, would represent a more diverse population. I think at the point in which we can double 300 to 600 kids, or get from 300 anywhere above there, I think it's more reflective of what our community could show. And I think the program is to get kids in this after-school program for all the reasons we outlined previously.
Well, it's better for the kids too. I mean, they're meeting kids from they have to learn how to deal with people on every level of society, and it starts as kids.
And in the TAC program, we had conversations about, well, if it's just, you know, there's different perceptions or, I guess, stigmas if it becomes, you know, the low-income program, or if it becomes a hyper specialized program, it becomes a different program than just our Kids on the Block program. I mean, we're already finding out that it's a certain type of person is only getting access or getting ahead of the line and getting access to our program, because we only have 300 spots and it's a super low barrier to entry. Why wouldn't we want as many kids as we can getting in the program?
I don't know. I don't think that my thought on it was, why wouldn't we want as many kids as possible getting into the program? It was more the question of, why would the focus be to only make it bigger? Sometimes bigger is just bigger.
I think from a TAC perspective, and somewhat a personal perspective of being a kid that went through KOB is that after school 3-hour window that they're there might be the only time that that kid that's been in reading programs all day gets to interact and play with kids that are in, math or more standardized classroom time. And so it lets people blend and have culture diversity that they don't get at home and they don't get during the school day. And I think that provides a great benefit to the students as a whole and makes for a better community at school.
Just to add to that, a couple of safeguards that would be in place related to the quality of the program. And this is something that Oregon Ask had to keep telling me as we were going through this. And I was like, but we want to make sure everything we do is making it a quality program. That's what all of the recommendations are designed to get us to continue to build the quality program that we have the 30-year foundation on. So they've set up these recommendations. Right now, we operate the programs out of the schools. School district we have an agreement that says we will use this space, we will have it for these times. So the school district in other cities and other locations, the school district is the one that enters into agreements with providers. That is a quality control method, if it's continued on with whoever is providing it, whether it's us or others, that they could have some, this isn't working for us. I talked to other school districts that they switched providers because one wasn't working for them. So it's unless it's running out of a private facility, which we do have some of those in town, if they're planning on using either a city facility or a school district facility, there is that agreement that will say, we want you to operate in this way for these folks, for these families in our community to this level of standard. And it can even say at this cost or subsidizing this many people. There can be some control in that aspect of it as we roll it out. I would say what we're talking about tonight is really being in the exploratory phase for that conversation to see, is there an option that will bring more capacity, operate in the quality way that we wanted to, that I think both the school district and the city are in agreement of, and the community as well. Is there any interest in that, and what would it look like if we could do it? And then having those joint conversations with the school board where we can talk about, here's what we heard, here's what we saw, does this meet our needs as a community or does it not? I think there's still some opportunity for us to make sure we have those quality control checks in the process that goes through, unless it's a private provider operating out of a private facility. That helps.
Other questions or comments? So part of the ask tonight, Susan, if I'm not mistaken, is for us to look at the vision and mission and to give a sense whether we can support that so you can move forward in the planning and the direction. I've had an opportunity to be at a few of the meetings, and so I really see the discussion and the level of participation that we've had, which has been very, I think, appropriate and looking at all sides. We spent quite a little time on the vision and mission. It was not an easy process. And so if in our packets, I think it's page 4, at the very top of the short and long-term goals, we have the vision and the mission. And again, there's a proposed mission in front of us. I just want to get a sense if that's something that we feel we can support as a council so that staff can move forward, or do we say it doesn't fit with where I am from a philosophy and policy standpoint and go back and work on it. So I think that's where we are. So I'll just open up that discussion. In front of us is the mission. So let's go ahead and just go over the mission. Any comments or thoughts?
No, I think it's really well drafted. It's clear, and I appreciate the work that you all put into it. I'm really looking forward to the next phase of that program. And also, I agree, expanding access to services when you're serving 300 and you have a wait list of 100, it'd be nice to serve more kids. So
thank you, Sal.
I would
concur with Counselor Peralta, and thank you all for all your work on it. You've done well.
Thanks, Kelly. Any,
Yeah, I mean, I guess, of course, I want all residents to have access to a wonderful after-school program. I think, my concern is in the vision statement, it's saying all elementary school kids have access to an after-school program. That tips its hat towards bringing in a outside provider, because we know already, right, that that's not something we are able to do. So to me, that then there's some conflict there. If you're saying that what we want to do is evaluate whether or not we have the capacity to keep rolling, or if it's time to bring in an outside provider, by moving forward with this in the way that this vision is written, to me, that reads really that we're deciding that it's time to bring in an outside provider because we've just recognized our own capacity and our capacity doesn't align with the vision. And so then it kind of goes back to that, is the vision to make it accessible to all elementary school kids, or why was KOB founded, and how do we pull that forward? And not necessarily nostalgia based, but what does the community need? And I really support the KOB program, and that's what I want to do, which is why I'm taking a moment here, because I think it's important that we keep that focus, and that we don't that the focus isn't only on what a bigger program can look like, but what's the community need, which has aspects of diversity that are important to it, but that safety net for our kids has been so important for so many decades, and I don't want to lose that.
So I think that point took about 2 hours of our hour-and-a-half meeting.
yeah,
That one time on the meeting number 3 was that discussion. And so it's a great point. We're crafting a vision to create a program in the future. And if we were crafting a vision for the program we currently have, we would write 350 kids in McMinnville are going to get a chance to have this cool program. I'd like to be a part of something that built a program that got to that.
But why do you, so you're
we're the
you're
best
making
ones
a
to offer it,
conclusion
great.
then? You're concluding that there's not a way to expand internal capacity.
If I was shown a program that we could offer this, the city of McMinnville could offer this, done.
So you're saying the city of McMinnville can't offer this?
With the resources we have right now, it's clear to me from the Oregon Ask assessment, there's a gap between what we can do and how many slots we can offer and the community need. So while I have great pride in the program that we do operate and great pride in the work that we do, the waiting list alone indicates that we aren't able to serve that. We were nervous committing to 300 slots this year, quite honestly, with the way the hiring went last year. Janet's done a lot of work working with partners. The school district has stepped in. Shemeketa has stepped up. We've had a lot of good conversations that we feel better this year about committing to those 300 spots. But there's a gap with what the community needs and what we can currently provide under the structure that we have, and whether that's our pay scale or our, we need to look at all of those things, and we think outside providers can help us put that look onto it. It may be, if no one steps forward and says, we think we can provide it for more kids, either in addition to or in lieu of the program as it currently exists, we may be back saying, okay, here's the gap now to get where we need to be as a community.
I really appreciate, as you were discussing how we've changed for this coming year, where we've involved the school district and the principals and the counselors that are really in the know of where the needs are. We've never had that kind of, again, remember, it's the first person that knew how to get into the system was the one that participated. And so I like this kind of split where the school district can take the kids with the greatest needs, but then we also provide it for our citizens, so it's a blended approach. Is that the best way to do it? I don't know, but it's a good start, I think. And with the input that we received from Ask Oregon and their expertises, that report really gave us some insights on what we ought to look like, but also on those funding things that we're struggling with a little bit. That sustainability of funding is so critical for the long-term nature of this program. I mean, could we go out and try to do an endowment? Well, we'd love to do that and have dollars, but that's been very difficult. We've been running off the successes of prior mayor's ball, and we have maybe, 3 more years at our level now, and then we're out of dollars. And so that's why it's critical, but we're not going so quickly that we're making foolish choices right now. It's been a very active discussion, and we feel the pressure, but we don't feel the pressure because we're going to do it right, the McMinnville way. So I just wanted to share from my perspective, those are some of the feelings I had. I think we're right on the right trail. But again, council needs to say, yes, this is where we need to continue to move forward. My thought is, if we were ever to make this a private enterprise, it would have to come back to the council. We're not going to give this program away. So by saying every elementary school child has access to the program, and if down the road there is a private way to do it better and cheaper for us, it will come back to council. So we're not giving anything away, control, oversight, but again, I think it's just the words that help us to be so inclusive, as both of our counselors talked about, the diversity and the multicultural and all the things that having more kids involved in the program can bring. So other discussions, I think we've got an overwhelming to move forward. I'm guessing these two, being that they were on the committee and helped drive that process, would be a support. So do you feel comfortable, Susan, that you've got enough to move forward? And Janet?
Yes, so next steps would be, I'll work with Jeff and we'll work on scheduling a joint meeting. And this will be the packet that you have tonight, pages 4 and 5 will be the basis for the discussion at the joint meeting. And I can even work on some of the language of the concerns that were raised tonight and some of the thoughts so that they know where we're coming from.
Thank you. And again, just to recognize those that are in the audience that were a part of those discussions, the Task Force Advisory Committee, Dale was there from the very get-go. It's really a part of his legacy, not that he was looking for that, but it's something that has taken much time and effort to get to a point where it is, and all we're wanting to do is enhance it and make it work right for the environment that we're involved in right now. So again, any other final comments? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close our work session this evening, and we'll open up our regular session at 7.
We couldn't afford the permit for the candles.
Oh, I'll have cake.
Watching it grow. was asking me about this fine, so I asked Heather what the deal was.
Thank you for the birthday wishes. I'll go ahead and open the city council meeting this August 27th, 2019. And we've asked Zach to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Zach. We excuse Wendy with an excused absence this evening. That takes us to our invitation for public comment. Any person in the audience that would like to speak on any topic other than a matter that is in litigation, quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing at some future date can come and speak to the council. We limit that to a 3-minute per person and a total of 30 minutes. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a speaking card and turn that in. Have we had any this evening? Okay. We are waiting for Valerie to get here to run us through a discussion on the 3-mile bridge replacement project, and she's not here yet. So let's go through advice and information items. And so reports from counselors on their committee and board assignments. And I'll start with Adam tonight.
So we just heard from KOB TAC. YCOM board's been postponed until October, I believe. And I just got news that our airport commission, September 3rd, will be postponed due to lack of agenda items. But we do have the air show and the Red Arrows coming. So if you haven't got your tickets, be sure to get out there and hear those jets roar.
Thank you, Adam. Val?
No August meeting for Mid-Valley Council of Governments. Will be meeting in September.
No meeting for Visit McMinnville this month, but we will be seeing them on Wednesday, the 18th. Is that right? Yes. And it'll be an interesting evening, so look forward to it.
Great, thank you. I'm going to shoot down to Zach, and then we'll work our way back.
Let's see. Historic Landmarks Committee had no July meeting. Landscape Committee had a July meeting, which was fun as usual. Make friends, cut down trees. And Kids on the Block had, you just heard from our report. So that's my committee reports.
Thank you, Zach. Remy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The McMinnville Affordable Housing Task Force meets tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the large conference room at the City Planning Department, and we'll be discussing some different housing programs and newly available funds through the state, and outreach that members of that committee have been doing to partners within the city to see how we can best support them in funneling some of those or helping them to acquire some of those state funds to increase access to affordable housing. And then we'll also be hearing some updates on some other projects that we have in the works. One on new or expansion of our domestic violence shelters, and a update on the floating zone. And then the Housing for Homeless Subcommittee doesn't meet until the end of the month.
Thank you, Remy. We held our Newburgh-Dundee Bypass Committee meeting earlier in the month and had an opportunity to really focus a little bit on the lack of support from ODOT on our project. We have really had a year of advocating for the full bypass, and that just not phase 2, but phase 2 and 3. We have the money set aside for design, yet we're not moving forward on design. I had an opportunity at the mayor's annual conference to talk to Travis Brower, who is the associate director of ODOT, and got an email back from him saying that because we don't have the total financing for design and right away, we're not a priority. And so we've kind of sharpened our pencil, and we're kind of focusing on the tactics we're going to be using with ODOT and our representatives in the House and the Senate to see what we can do. There's monies available. We just need to continue to advocate. We know that the governor has committed 32 million in her budget, and that was not approved and not sent towards us. That would have gotten us through all of right-of-way and design. So we're moving forward from that perspective. More to come. It's a ongoing. It's been ongoing for many, many years. We'll continue with that focus. Okay. Department heads. Chief.
Real quick, Mr. Mayor and Council, I just want to give you a quick update. Park ranger season is going to be coming to a close. I think probably October sometimes. I want to give again a shout out to the Parks Department, both Mike's shop and then obviously Parks and Rec. This parks this year have been fantastic, and it's due to the combination of teamwork within the city, but as important and probably most importantly, the park rangers. If you've been through the park system, they've really been. It's been a pleasant surprise that there has been absolutely no issues in any of the parks that we're dealing with on a consistent basis. It's maybe some hit and miss stuff, but they really did a fantastic job, and they're to be applauded. Did want a couple notes. We have 2 graduating from the police academy next Friday. That'll be a nice. We will not have anybody in the academy at that time. And then lastly, last Saturday's cruising McMinnville, it went off without a hitch. That group is so very thorough and thoughtful in their taking on the responsibility of essentially taking over the downtown area for that one day. And Councilor Garvin's a part of that. I do know that, and there was no issues at all downtown with them. They are staffed superbly, and they're very organized and competent in running that event. So I wanted to let you know that there was no issues whatsoever down there.
Thank you, Chief. Susan?
Thank you, and thank you, Chief. Obviously, the Park Ranger program is doing well under his leadership and his department's staffing as well. They've done an amazing job, so it's nice to see this year. I want to take the opportunity to give you Jay Pearson Neighborhood Park update. If you haven't been by, please go by. It's very exciting out there. The play equipment is up. The safety surfacing is not down yet, so we're not promoting play on the equipment yet. But the picnic shelter went up today, and the restroom should be being delivered sometime in the next couple of weeks. We are on schedule right now and anticipate an opening sometime in early October. Very exciting out there.
I think I had an opportunity yesterday to go out, and the sign is phenomenal. It's so colorful, and it just draws attention, and the colorfulness of the playground equipment, knowing that, we've got that equipment that can service anyone with disabilities is very exciting. So you can almost envision what it's going to look like at this point.
Anlene was here. She's done a great job of being a project manager on that program. She just left thinking that she wasn't going to be here for the updates, but she's done a great job of all of the details, along with Mike's staff, really making sure that the construction is done in a way that we can maintain it for a long time.
Thank you, Susan. Marcia?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to mention that I have been working with our new interim finance director all of last week and this week. And her name is Elizabeth Comfort, as you know. She's been finance director in several cities, Sherwood, Wesleyan, Newburgh, has lots of nonprofit accounting experience. I have been very impressed working with her this last week. She's approachable, friendly, very intelligent, gets it, is very interested in our processes, and she likes my staff and they like her, so that's always a good thing too. So I just wanted to mention, I think that the finance department and the city's finances will be in really good hands with her.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you for your continued additional support of what we're trying to do here in the interim. And I know you could be focused on other things, but you're very focused here, so thank you. Heather?
Yeah, so good evening, Mayor and councilors. We have two meetings next week, two project meetings relative to our growth discussions I wanted to share with you. On Wednesday from 3 to 5, our project advisory committee for the city center housing strategy will be meeting with the consultant team and working through that process. That's at the Community Development Center in a large conference room. And then on Thursday from 3:30 to 6:30, our economic opportunity analysis and our what we call sort of our public, semi-public land need analysis meeting will occur from 3:30 to 6:30 in the police training room.
Thank you, Heather. Mike? Melissa? David? And Jeff?
Mayor, members of the council, a couple of items. It's exactly as I drove 2,500 miles from where I picked up the rental car to my driveway last week. So we're back. We brought a bug collection from 5 different states and a cracked windshield. So it was a momentous vacation. I've had the opportunity to be invited to speak a couple of times this week. I spoke to 2 services at the McMinnville Cooperative Ministries on Sunday as part of their summer speaking series, and I'll be presenting to the Sunrise Rotary Club tomorrow morning. And in the vein of speakers and presentations, I'll be attending the ICMA conference in October. Kylie Bayer, our HR manager, will be there as well. She proposed a seminar topic to ICMA. It was accepted, and so she'll be there as part of a panel presentation. And my wife was also invited to serve on a panel. I've been in ICMA 34 years and haven't done that yet, but I'm happy for Kylie and Doris. You know that tonight is Marcia's last city council meeting as finance director. You know that there's a social going away. Marcia has asked that there be no program and no pomp and circumstances and no speeches and that sort of thing, but I have the mic. I've had the great good fortune of working with Marcia for the last 2.5 years. I did sort of highlight for you that despite my boyish good looks, I'm in the 34th year of my career. I've worked with at least 9 finance directors, and it's not because she's leaving. I will tell you that Marcia is the finest finance director with whom I've had the privilege of working, and I want to thank you for your service. And so because I couldn't give a speech next Friday, I decided to do it now, and I'll pay the price over the next 2.5 to 3 days, I'm sure, but that's all I have to report tonight.
Thank you, Jeff.
Very much. I really do appreciate it. If I could just say, I did say no speeches, no plaques, but that's okay. And I just wanted to thank, though, the council, the almost 11 years that I've been here now. I have felt so supported, and I have just always appreciated the attention of the council to the budget and our finances. I think you are a really incredible group of people. And I also, as always, want to give credit to my staff. There is nothing that I have done that I could have done without them. And so I just always really want to give them credit as well, and to say thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Marcia. I also am going to be out of town this week, so I'm not going to be able to come over to the reception, but what a privilege from my perspective as a city councilor and as mayor and a member of the budget committee and the audit committee to have worked all these years with you. It has been a joy. I take your budget book many places I go and I show it, and we can look back at John, he says, yes, God does. But at the same token, the ability to do a very technical job in such a transparent way in getting our story out, I I just can't tell you how much I've appreciated the way that you do your job, and you're surely going to be missed. And so those would be my few words at your retirement, and knowing great things are coming your way as one that's gone through retirement. I know you're going to be busy and doing all kinds of good things, but again, wish you well and thank you. Okay, let's go ahead, and we've got a presentation tonight, and Valerie, we'll have you come up, and Valerie is going to do, she's our ODOT project manager on the 3 Mile Bridge Replacement Project, and tonight we're going to have a presentation on where we're at and what we can look forward to, and so welcome, Valerie.
I'm Valerie Greenway, Senior Transportation Project Manager with ODOT. I've been working on bridge projects about a year. So first of all, as far as information, I'm going to give you an overview as far as the schedule and plans for the project. We'll show you some details. We'll see how they look up here on the screen, but I also brought printouts which I will leave in the lobby. And there's additional contact information out there and an information sheet. I know I've received several questions, so we'll try and cover some of those. For the items that maybe aren't addressed in this overview and is more technical or maybe not to that point yet, we will follow up directly on those.
Valerie, we'll get you a roving mic, and so that we can.
Am I not loud enough?
Well, when your back is turned to whoever, they're going to have a hard time.
And it's televised, so you can pick up
Yeah.
the recording.
Melissa, are you running that? Okay. Let's go ahead and look. So this is a plan and profile of the bridge. Let me give you a little overview as far as how our project management goes. Yes? Is that better?
It has to pick up for the recording. So that,
Yes.
Thank you.
So our design team is about 30 technical specialists, and we meet every couple months. Your representative, Mike Bissett, attends most of those meetings as well. This example is the plan and elevation of the proposed bridge. One of the main items I can point out is it is going in pretty much the same location as the existing bridge. The existing right-of-way there is very limited. It's very narrow. We are not getting more right-of-way. There's a natural resource conservation district under the bridge. So that's shown on those plans as well. We have some temporary easements. We are getting permissions from them while we construct the bridge. But, and I will show you a little bit more information on that, but it's a multi-year construction project with access, the access for the temporary bridge, and then removing everything when you have the new bridge. So as far as our budget and timeline, as most of you know, you probably have more history on the bridge than I do. The bridge has been in the works for many years, and it's actually been in this process since about 2015, 2016, Mike. We are past preliminary plans and headed into advanced plans. We have about 12 months left on design. So right now the bridge is scheduled to go out to bid the end of 2020. I actually have a bid date of December 17th. And then the construction schedule would be 2021 to 2024. It's a 3-year anticipated, fingers crossed. Of course, those things tend to run long, but we'll say 3 years right now. So the overview here is the top photo is the plan view, looking down, bird's eye view on the bridge. The elevation shows the columns, and then it'll be a steel span underneath with the paving and decking on top. Go ahead and move on, Melissa. I don't need that one. This is a cross-section of the new bridge, so that's your width. And there's another plan coming up that'll show you in comparison to the current bridge. The current bridge is 26 feet wide with limited access. It just has travel lanes, very limited pedestrian access. This new bridge The center part is 36 wide, so that's two 12-foot travel lanes. There's a 6-foot shoulder on each side, and then 5.5-foot sidewalks up to the rail. The other items you see there below the bridge is the utilities, so those hang from the bridge. So this bridge carries a lot of the utilities, so that's part of our logistics as well when we move the bridges. And we're coordinating that with the local agency and the various utilities. This is the temporary bridge. So this is the first stage, pretty much. We'll do some clearing and some other mobilization, but basically they will come in and build a bridge. You can't hardly tell, but it's the stripes on the lower half of that top picture. This bridge is pile driven, so they drive piles in and then put the temporary bridge there. The traffic will then be moved. There'll be traffic controls approaching that and transition over to the new bridge, which will be adjacent to the old bridge. And then after everything's moved over and maintaining traffic, there'll be other things as far as relocating those utilities that will have been in the works, but eventually the main bridge will be taken down and then the new construction will begin on that portion.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
How much of the budget, what is it, $38 million budget, how much of that budget is for the temporary bridge?
I don't have the exact number. It was value engineered, which means they looked at that alternative, among other things, instead of a detour or instead of a closure or instead of doing like a partial and a partial. And so we had a full study on it, and this was determined to be the most economical option. There were also concerns about maintaining access for emergency vehicles and just public access because it's such a main thoroughfare. I think at the time it was 16,000 vehicles. It's probably even more now. I don't know when the most recent traffic study is, but it's a lot of vehicles.
Do you have a rough estimate of how much of the budget?
Remember, Mike, is it 40? I want to, I don't know. I hate to say on it. I probably have it in my documents with me because I have a summary.
Oh, really?
On the timeline, how long will it take you to build that temporary bridge?
Yeah.
That'll be the first phase, and, it's probably about, not quite a third of that, maybe the first,
First year?
May I ask, and sorry if this sounds naive, but if we're building one bridge so that we can build another bridge, why don't we just build one bridge?
Because the logistics of taking that one down and maintaining the traffic, really.
No, but I mean, what's the thinking behind, so this temporary bridge, what's the thinking behind
We don't
not?
have, where the temporary bridge is going, we do not have right-of-way. We don't own that property.
Okay,
So we
thank you.
can't put it there. So the
Understood.
only other option would be to tear down your bridge and you would have no access.
I understand now, thank
Then
you.
you would have a bridge.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the biggest thing. And then as far as there are some other ways it could have been phased differently rather than the bridge, but it would have required a detour or something like that. And they looked at those impacts to, the various travel patterns and emergency vehicles. But the right-of-way is the big thing. This project, that's a federal agreement we are still working on. And it's been very tedious to get those permissions to even be there. And as far as when we leave, how this property needs to be and such. And so there was never even a consideration, as far as I know, of expanding the right-of-way and getting more to do anything as far as relocating the bridge. If we had had more right-of-way, what you frequently will see is maybe an alternative alignment. They'll put another bridge either adjacent or in a different alignment in close proximity, or do half and half and then demolition the current bridge. But those really aren't long-term. We don't have that long-term option here.
Are there any weight restrictions on the temporary bridge of the load that can be handled?
Yes, I don't even have the full design on that yet, so I do not have those numbers. But there will be limitations, not only that, but just on the travel-wise due to the widths and such.
Okay.
And when I show you the staging picture, you'll see a little bit more because it shows, I think you have it in your packets as well. It shows the existing and then the temporary bridge widths on there. Any other questions?
Yeah, would the easements and property rights preclude us from repurposing the temporary bridge after construction or primary usage resumes on the main bridge?
Yes.
To use it as something as a pedestrian or bicycle?
It is a temporary, basically construction easement for the bridge, and it has to be removed, not only the temporary bridge, but we have to pull out all the piles that we use. It has to be as if it was never there.
And what happens with those materials?
There is reclaimed on that. I think we even talked about the different types of piles we're using, but our environmentalists look at that. I don't think I have the full design yet, but they discuss what types of piles and how we pull them out, and they'll either be reused or repurposed. There's, if you have more questions on that, I can put you in touch with the bridge designer. And as we move forward, probably in the next 6 months, I'm happy we will be doing open houses and more public information. So those are great opportunities to educate the public more on that type of detail when it's available. Zach, did that answer your questions? Okay, so this is the staging plan. What you see is a cross-section in view. The first one on the top left is the current bridge, 26 feet wide. It shows a little bit of the lip of the curb there. The one on the right is the temporary bridge. So you can see the type of construction it is, where it's very like precast and how they build it, and with temporary railings and that type of thing. The stage will be, and this details this out, I will have these plans out front for people to look at, that it'll shift. We build the temporary bridge, we shift the traffic from there, then you go to the next stage where we start construction on the new bridge. Traffic is still on the temporary bridge. The bottom, the third picture on the left is the cross-section of the new bridge. And then at the bottom is the final new bridge with the removal of the temporary bridge. So that is the logistics of the construction phases. Right now it's identified as 4 phases. And this is something that also, as we get further along in the public open houses, we'll have more information to share on how that works. Thank you, Melissa. These are really hard to see here, but we had several questions based on the traffic control and such. So this is showing how that tie-in for the temporary bridge compared to, so this is actually both bridges side by side, and then the overlap there where it's kind of dark at the intersection is how that will work for getting on the bridge. I also have some additional lead into that with the traffic control and signs, just so you will see how people would navigate up that road and then across the temporary bridge. And this is the other side. I think there were some additional questions on the residential streets. These aren't really shown as far as that detail yet, but we do show primarily the pedestrian access and the tie-ins for the traffic, but that's definitely something. The traffic control plans are not complete yet, so I don't have all that information. And that will also do with, just the phasing of the project. I'm sure there will be intermittent closures near the residential areas as we tie in, and there will be flaggers located on each side of the travel ways.
And what kind of notification will residents get if you're going to have a temporary closure? And what's the longest you anticipate any closure being for?
The lane closures are going to be pretty much, ongoing, but there won't be an anticipation of a full closure. Those would be much less likely. They would still be notified in the cases that that's required. Part of that is when we get down to the construction bid opening in a year, we have at that point our construction schedule, which really lays that out as to the phasing. So I don't have the specific timelines yet. Then when the contractor bids it, they also verify it because they're allowed to propose within that schedule how the project moves forward. So at that time is when we would really be alerting people as to the real schedule, if you will. Any of my open houses and public information meetings will probably have just what you're saying, kind of the largest anticipated inconvenience, so we're very aware of it, and we try and minimize it as much as possible. There will be advanced signs, and just like you see on any major construction project. Local residents, we of course would do, outreach and contacts and invitations.
And what's your protocol for that type of notification? Will residents get 24 hours, 48 hours?
Oh, no,
How much notice?
More of a bigger schedule. We also have the main website, which will be updated as we go. We'll have a project-specific website, and we also have now 3 full-time communications staff in our region department office to help coordinate that. So the specifics for an actual closure or any like utility impacts or anything like that would be more, of a limited timeline within a couple days. But for the overall project of ongoing traffic controls, it would be more advanced.
Okay. And then is construction going to be daytime only, nighttime only, 24 hours a day?
It will probably vary, just be the length of the bridge, length of the bridge construction. Mostly, there's some of the larger components of this is pile driving, which is a noise factor. And that one, of course, would have limited hours. And again, when we do those full traffic control plans, we also look at things like whether it be event schedules for the community, other times that they're going to need to make the area more accessible for vehicles and such. So there is consideration for, the schedule moving forward.
Valerie, if I could interject a little bit and just add to the information, ODOT has allowed both the city and McMinnville Water and Light to add utility work into their project. Specifically, we'll be adding a force main from the intersection of Cumulus and 3 Mile Lane across the bridge to Brooks. Right now, that existing force main is decades old and goes under the river. And so our master plan anticipates that when the bridge is replaced, we'll put a new sewer line on it. McMinnville Water and Light additionally has plans to add water lines across the new bridge and make tie-ins on both sides. And so there'll be utility work as part of ODOT's project that the city of McMinnville Water and Light will pay for that will have a traffic impact along those stretches on both sides of the bridge that are outside the actual bridge work. We're working through those designs now. ODOT's bridge design consultant is also doing the utility design for McMinnville Water and Light and for the city. You may recall we brought those contracts to you. It's probably been a year to 18 months ago, and they've been working on that utility design. We're not to the point where we know exactly where those lines will be constructed and what the traffic impacts will be, but that will be certainly part of the ODOT project overall, and we'll make sure that the outreach related to the utility efforts is included with their bridge outreach.
So will there be a suspension of services?
No, so, and John's here, he can correct me if I'm wrong. The water line crossing of the bridge will be a new connection that doesn't exist now. And our plan for the sewer force main is to keep the old line under the river in service, except for a very short window when we tie in the new line that's constructed. So when we built the pump station that's along the frontage road 15 years ago, we anticipated that this project would happen at some point, and we added the valving and the T's to allow for the extension of the force main across the new bridge. And so the sewer impact should be minimal and not noticeable to our sewer users.
Okay, great. And do you anticipate the city conducting its work in daytime, nighttime, all the time?
So it'll be ODOT's contractor doing the utility work. They've allowed us to roll it into their contract, which is a much better approach to the overall project work rather than them doing the bridge work and then Water and Light in the city coming along afterwards and doing utility work. So we're going to have that work happen in the same 3-year window that is planned for the bridge project. There is a possibility that some of that utility work will be nighttime work. We don't know those details yet because we don't know how it's going to be staged. We're balancing impact to the traveling public because it is a highly used corridor versus the constructability of the utility. So that information is being put together and developed as we develop the utility design. So we're a few months away from knowing those answers.
Okay, thank you.
And related to that, we're actually working on a survey, so you'll see they're going to go out and verify those existing utilities, but there will be a little bit of construction work in the next, I'd say in the next couple of weeks to a month as we really verify those final details and then close out hopefully that connections and tying in all those utilities.
Okay.
Melissa? how do I say this, Winooski. This is the ramp on the Newport or Newburgh Dundee. This is very similar in detail to the rail on the bridge. It's actually a standard ODOT design, and even as much as the powder coating on the handrail itself. So that's more for reference. I think it helps to really see an actual item. I don't even have a full drawing detail yet in the plan set, but when I do, we're also still working through some confirmations with the state engineer for approval on that, but that's pretty much what we see going forward. So that'd be the only thing, is if we get corrections from them, they have a little bit different safety design now.
Is there any conversation about including any local artists or design worker or something like that, since this is so much a gateway to our city?
On this bridge, that surface treatment even is a decorative option, and I'm not saying that's the example we're doing. I'm saying that is typical of facing that. That can actually be a smooth face if it was the standard design. Mostly the original agreements are for the city would pay for any increased cost for that, and this is a very large bridge. It's almost 1,000 feet long, so it's not completely decided yet, but it's not part of the current plans, and it hasn't been budgeted for at all in $38 million of the project. So.
Okay.
This is, you probably know this picture, it's a city decorative light. Those will be the lights on the illumination on the rail. So they kind of sit up and behind that handrail.
And will there be any signage on the bridge?
As far as?
Any type of signage?
Most of it's on the approaches. I don't think we have any, I haven't seen the full details for any other construction, highway related signs or anything. There's nothing decorative proposed. Can you please use the microphone? Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I can't hear that it's there, so. Are we done? No. This is an example of the revegetation plan, but this would be down in the riverbed, so in that natural resource conservation area. And just to show the density of the planning, so this was part of the agreement with NRCS, and they've reviewed all the revegetation plans, and this is only one little piece of that. It's gridded, and then, like I said, I have these plans out front in case you're interested in that level of detail of what kind of plants there are and such. It's underneath the bridge, and it's just a small piece of that. So the grids are, it's a very big open space in the riverbed. When the temporary bridge comes out, this would be one of the last items done. This is the final closeout after they've been down there and torn it up and put in the bridges and then took out the temporary bridge. This is the restoration item. So not only is it a planting plan, but there's usually a guarantee on, the maintenance of the plants. So we do they call it an establishment period, but we have to make sure that they are successful. So it's going to be very restored when it's done.
So are these all native species that are going to be planted?
Yes.
Awesome. On the copy that we have, the print's all blurry, so I can't open it up and actually see what there will be there. Where are the construction vehicles going to be staged during construction?
We do temporary construction easements. It'll be on private property. And right now that's primarily planned to be on the church property, and then there'd be an access down below. So that's a separate agreement. However, contractors, when they get down to the actual staging and development, they occasionally negotiate other offsite, so that may be subject to changes depending on the logistics of the construction. But there will be designated offsite staging, fenced construction area.
Are the speed limits going to be affected at all during or after construction, or will they remain the same?
I do not have that information. Do you know, Mike, on the design with Chris?
I do remember that, particularly on the detour bridge, they're talking about a lower construction speed. I don't recall any discussion about revisiting existing speed zones once the construction's done, but that would typically be a separate process after the work's done and traffic restores.
The detail I have with the lead into the bridge has the posted traffic, but that's all temporary traffic control. It is not a permanent, speed reduction or anything.
Okay. And then you touched on this earlier. We talked about, the secondary bridge being preferable to any diversions or alternate routes. So I just want to be clear that in my understanding, does that mean that at no point will traffic be diverted from that bridge? Or I guess kind of the question that I'm not asking is, is there any point in which traffic will be diverted from our downtown?
Not specifically. Again, I'm happy to show the detail for the planning. Just by the nature of construction, I don't think it would affect as much the downtown area, but just the approaches to the bridge. I mean, if you have an alternate route, you may not choose to go that way for various reasons just during the logistics of it. And if there's concerns about that, the agency is very used to dealing with, acknowledging existing businesses. There's not as many businesses fronting the property right there like we have in other downtown areas that we work. We work in downtown McMinnville and Lafayette. And in those areas, of course, we make an effort to work with each of the property owners as to maintaining their access and, public convenience. Is that our last one, Melissa?
I think for context on that, Remy, one of the design options at one point, and there were multiple value engineering options considered when they got to the point where they understood what the cost of this project was going to be. And one of the options that was explored at one point was one-way traffic from downtown to the hospital. So building a much smaller detour bridge to allow for only outgoing traffic. And we had discussions with public safety and at a high level with the project team. And given the volume of traffic that needs to go both ways through that corridor, that was determined not to be a viable option. So there were a number of iterations and options looked at with the intention of maintaining as best as possible traffic flow into and out of McMinnville during the duration of the project. Certainly, I think, Valerie, you would agree that there'll be times at the tie-ins when they're constructing the tie-in to the new detour bridge and then taking the detour bridge out where there may be some temporary lane closures and temporary closures that impact traffic on specific days at specific operations. But until we get to the actual construction and the contractor sequencing, we can't really detail for you when those might be or how long those will be. Just the complexity of the construction. She mentioned underneath the bridge on both sides is a national natural resource conservation easement that can't be permanently impacted. The city's park is a 4F, 6F park that's received federal funding in the past, and it can't be permanently impacted. On the opposite side of the bridge at the other end, there's some properties that have potential historic quality, and so those can't be permanently impacted. So it's a very tight corridor, and it's a very sort of complex construction project, and that's why the ultimate decision was to leave the bridge in its current alignment. And the way you do that is move traffic temporarily, tear the old one down, build a new one, and then move traffic back.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Valerie? Is that
What is the method of demolition to the bridge?
We talked about that? I don't think that's come up.
I mean, like an excavator will come and just grab it and break it down, or are you going to blow it up like the Kingdom, or?
Valerie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe if Alan's still here, he'll chime in. Oftentimes they'll build a temporary work bridge adjacent to the bridge they're demolishing so that they can basically be staged on the work bridge, tearing the old bridge down. So
Jackhammers and pieces of,
Yeah,
yep, okay.
of course, this is mostly wood underneath. It's a truss bridge, so, I mean, there's the deck on top, which would be removed, but mostly,
Once you get through that, then it should be good.
yeah,
Okay.
I would think it's almost easier.
Are we in burn season yet? I don't think so.
Other comments? John, any comments from Water and Light that you might have at this point? Okay. Well, thank you, Valerie, for taking the time and updating us. And Mike, thanks for the continued work from that perspective. Okay, that takes us this evening to our consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. I'll go ahead and ask, are there any counselors that would like to take any item off the consent agenda this evening? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And it's been moved by Zach and seconded by Adam. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, signify by saying nay. This consent agenda passes unanimously 5-0 this evening. Okay, we have our resolutions before us this evening. The first that we're going to consider is Resolution 2019-57, a resolution authorizing the lease of real property to Creekside Valley Farms, LLC, pursuant to ORS 271.310. We'll call on Mike to lead us in the discussion. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I'll refer you to the staff report that's in your packet from Project Manager Larry Sherwood, as well as a vicinity map outlining the acreage that has been and will continue to be farmed at the treatment plant, copy of the proposed lease agreement between the city and Creekside Valley Farms, and the resolution authorizing the city to enter into that lease agreement. The land in question has been farmed under lease for a number of years, essentially since the plant was completed in the mid-90s. Most recently, for the last decade or so, Creekside Valley Farms has been the farmer on this property. They also have historically farmed property at the airport, although they're not a current lessee farmer of airport property. Their lease was set to expire at the end of this month, and as part of our due diligence, we issued a request for proposals to area farmers to gauge interest in a lease arrangement and to determine the best possible lease arrangement for the property. We received 4 proposals. Those proposals were ranked and reviewed, evaluating the farmer's qualifications and experience in dry land farming. This is all dry land farm area. There's no irrigation. Financial qualifications were requested so we could determine the financial ability of the farm to enter into a long-term lease. We requested the lease proposal financial terms, and we requested information on compliance history related to the farm activities of the submitting proposers. The received RFPs were reviewed by me, wastewater manager Leland Kester, and project manager Larry Sherwood. At the conclusion of the review process, it was determined that Creekside Valley Farms was the highest proposer. They additionally were the highest, they had the highest offer of lease amount on the property. We would point out that although Creekside Valley Farms has some recent compliance history that's been reported in the press, none of those issues were on city-owned property, either at the WRF or at the airport. And as part of their lease proposal, they noted that the employees involved in those violations no longer work for Creekside Valley Farms. So it's our recommendation this evening that you enter into the lease with Creekside Valley Farms for the 61.2 acres at a lease rate of $204.25 per acre. For context, we're leasing about 334 acres of land at the airport, also for dryland farming. That lease rate is currently at $175 an acre. We do receive some services in exchange for the lease at the airport. We do receive some mowing of areas adjacent to the runway and some spraying of areas also on the airport. Those services aren't necessary on these lease properties. And so what you're seeing is just strictly financial compensation for the lease terms. So with that, I'd entertain any questions, and if none, recommend that the council adopt the resolution entering into the lease agreement with the Creekside Valley Farm.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions?
I have one. I just
Go ahead, Zach.
curious. Oh, go ahead.
So Creekside, are they the same company or separate company or some way related to Western Ag? Or are they separate companies? Just in that, and what I'm getting at is in that story about the $80,000 DEQ violation for pesticide spray. For Creekside, they tied Western Ag to it, and I was wondering if you knew the difference between the two companies, or if it was sort of, that was the only note I had about Creekside's recent DEQ violations.
Western Ag's a separate company. I don't know the ownership of Western Ag, but it's my understanding that it's separate, not the same people as Creekside. They primarily provide consulting services, add chemicals to area farmers, do have some experience with that on a personal level.
Oh, so it's a supplier?
Correct.
Okay. And then it sounds like you guys brought it up in your grading process as one of the metrics in your rubric or whatever for compliance, and it sounds like they talked about it and said they've got rid of those employees or whatever, guilty with the violation, but I just wanted to know if you wanted to illuminate us more on the DEQ violations.
So I'm not privy to the details of the violations other than what I've seen in the press. It sounds like you have as well. They recently received fines from DEQ for pesticide violations, and there were a number of those across a number of properties throughout the western part of Oregon. None of those were on city-owned properties. They received the lowest score related to compliance history of the four proposals we evaluated. But they were the most complete from a financial standpoint. They had the highest price offered for the acreage, and all had very similar terms of experience and qualifications related to dryland farming. So based on the scoring matrix, they rose to the top of that evaluation.
So at 204.25 per acre, what was the next place for reference?
One of the proposers was at about $201 per acre. They provided no financial qualifications information, so it was very hard to determine their financial viability to enter into a long-term lease. So they certainly scored much lower on that portion of the evaluation. The other two proposals were in the $100, low hundreds, so half the value that you receive for leasing that property.
No questions.
So they received much lower scores related to the financial piece.
Sure.
Proposal piece.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Zach. Any other questions? Kelly?
I was just curious. It seems unusual for you. I don't recall having requests for proposals on these type of rental agreements. Is this something unusual, or? I mean, usually you go back and renegotiate with the company you've been using, is what I've seen in the past.
So these farm leases do come before the council on a periodic basis. It's many years in between because they're planning to place a grass seed crop, and that grass seed crop has a life. And so I think the initial term of this lease is for 5 years with 5 renewals, if I'm right. Yep, the lease duration is initially 5 years with 5 one-year renewals that we can agree to. And so that gets basically from the beginning of the lease term through the life of a grass seed crop. Very similar RFP process we followed at the airport and brought that to you probably about 18 months ago, and we entered into a lease with Cower Farms for the properties at the airport.
Okay,
Very similar process with scoring criteria based on their qualifications, financial proposal. We also ask at the airport, what will you give us to, what can we get in addition to money? And the mowing and the spraying is a huge benefit to the
Yeah.
airport.
okay, thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Hearing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2019-57.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Council President Mankey and seconded by Sal. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The resolution passes 3-2.
I was an aye.
What's that?
I was yes.
She was a yes.
I was yes, I just forgot to say it, so then I
Okay,
said
okay.
it. I said aye when, at the nay time.
So we have the resolution passes 4-1. Go ahead.
Related to this, but not specific to it, I would be interested in conversation when, when we're bringing people in and looking at these future contracts and we're talking about sprays and disallowing noxious weeds, that we include language that talks about what types of sprays are going to be allowed, specific to things like glyphosate, which are, is now, very commonly accepted as a cancer-causing agent. We don't want to be spreading it all over our city. So I would like to see that integrated in a more organic approach to how we maintain, even though there's a workload that goes with it. If that's one of the things we're negotiating for is to take workload off the city, I think it's a perfect opportunity to continue in the vein that we've been working in for so many years, with having a greater eye towards our surrounding environment.
Thank you, Remy. Okay, we have for consideration Resolution 2019-58, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for the fiscal year 2019-2020 and making supplemental appropriations in the general fund, the police department. And so I'll call on Marcia to lead us in a discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I would refer you to the staff report in your packet tonight. There's actually two supplemental budgets on your agenda tonight, and they're both related to projects that were planned for 2018-19 and were carried forward to the current fiscal year 2019-20. So the resolution that proposes the supplemental budget in the general fund police department is related to 3 patrol vehicles that the police department has acquired. Back in May of 2019, the council authorized executing a lease purchase agreement to acquire those vehicles. And when I use the term lease purchase agreement, it is a financing agreement. We own the vehicles at the end of the life of the lease. The city actually very recently executed that lease purchase agreement for $153,497, which is the cost of the cars and the installation of the equipment. And the third patrol car was just delivered, I think, last week, due to some delays with the dealership and mostly upfitting the cars with all the equipment that's necessary that goes in these cars. There was quite a delay with getting that done. So we just got the last car, the third car. So because of that, the closing on that agreement was delayed, and this resolution then in the current fiscal year recognizes the $153,497 in proceeds that we will receive from the lease, and then it increases the capital outlay appropriations by the same amount. Staff recommends that adoption of this supplemental budget.
Okay. Any questions for Marcia? I have two, Marcia, and Chief may need to answer the one. Are we doing a regular patrol car, or are we starting to move towards SUVs?
We are moving towards SUVs over the last, I think, 2 fiscal years.
Okay.
I think I could speak to what we planned this coming fiscal year is a hybrid SUV, and I'll bring some more information on that, but it is where there's some significant fuel savings cost that these hybrids are bringing this coming fiscal year. But yeah, we're moving to the platform of the Explorer, which is very common in public safety now. Okay. It has more room.
Yeah, I'm seeing more of those types of vehicles, not only here, but through other jurisdictions throughout the state, so.
Yeah.
And then
There has been some significant issues with the Dodge Charger that we had recently or previously purchased that they had just been in the shop way too much. So
way too much.
that was the move that we decided to make.
Okay. And Marcia, just a question. When we're looking at the lease to own, I'm guessing there's cost savings doing that compared to going out and just doing regular financing on a vehicle?
I guess what I would say about that is that these police vehicles are unique. I guess, you couldn't go down to the Ford dealership and buy them as they are with all the upfitting. And so when I reached out to quite a number of companies about this lease purchase agreements, they all specialize in police vehicles. And so I think that we got a number of responses, and there was quite a range on the terms, but we did feel like we got pretty good terms, given that it really is a specialty.
A lot of add-ons and yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Zach?
I didn't see in here the offer to test drive before we approve. Is that still on the table?
Something that you needed to do personally? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very similar to the TASER program.
Oh, no, never mind, never mind. Like the Milo training? No, thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. So do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2019-58?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Zach and seconded by Sal. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. This resolution 2019-58 passes unanimously 5-0. This takes us this evening to a public hearing regarding Resolution 2019-59, a resolution adopting a supplemental budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 and making supplemental appropriations in the Emergency Communication Fund. We'll call on Marcia to lead us in this discussion. Marcia?
Thank you. This project, as you may recall, came in front of the council back in May also. At that time, the council awarded the contract to Motorola and Day Wireless for this communications equipment, which I don't really know a lot about, but I understand it will be extremely beneficial to make this upgrade to the emergency communications equipment. And the total cost of the project was a little over $300,000. We actually executed a lease for about $226,000. The remaining $75,000 is coming from some funds that we held in the Emergency Communications Fund. And those funds actually, which we intended to spend last year, were carried forward. I think there were some issues with the FCC licensing that delayed this project into the current fiscal year. The public hearing is necessary because the $300,000 supplemental budget that we are considering tonight is more than 10% of the budget. So that's required by budget law. And because it is more than 10%, the council is required to hold the hearing and take any public comment on the supplemental budget.
Thank you, Marcia. Any questions for Marcia from the council? Hearing none, then I will open the public hearing. And I'll ask if anyone in the audience would like to speak on this topic. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
These are the encryption radios.
So that closes, okay, and so we close the public hearing, and now we're going to consider Resolution 2019-59. And so I'll ask for a motion to approve 2019-59.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Adam, seconded by Kelly. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, indicate by saying nay. This resolution 2019-59 passes unanimously 5-0. This takes us now to our ordinances this evening, and we're going to have the first reading with possible second reading of ordinance number 5081 and 5082. They are both related to one development project, but are separate land use decisions. Does anyone object to reading both of these ordinances by title only? Okay, then what we'll do now is have a discussion, and Tom will lead us through the discussion on these two ordinances.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the City Council. This is a recommendation from the Planning Commission on a zone change and a subdivision. Typically, the Planning Commission makes a final decision on subdivisions, but when there are related applications, they're grouped, so they made recommendations so that both of the final decisions come to you for decision. This is just under a 3-acre property on Northeast Newby Street between Grand Haven and 27th. The first application, I'll present both items simultaneously, and then there will be the separate actions. First one is the first ordinance relates to the zone change from R1 to R3. And the second application is the tentative plan for a 17-lot single-family subdivision that proposes 15 single-family detached lots and lots for 2 single-family attached units. So you'll follow the procedure for an ordinance. Again, these are concurrent applications with one presentation but 2 separate actions, and it's a recommendation from the Planning Commission to you on both items. The council action options are to approve the applications as recommended. There are ordinances with findings in the attached decision documents that are exhibits to the ordinances. The other options are to call for a public hearing, and third option would be based on findings related to the criteria to, if you found that the criteria are not satisfied, to deny the application.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I know it's early. How is with the passage of House Bill 2001, how are our residential zones validated or invalidated by that bill, by the passage of that bill?
Cities have about 2 years to implement the provisions of the bill, so there's no immediate effect on that, the applications that are coming before us. So they're still subject to the applicable regulations and the acknowledged comprehensive plan and implementing ordinances that are in effect at the time of application.
Okay.
We have minutes in the record that are attached, so you have a summary of the testimony that was presented at the Planning Commission hearing, and they closed the public hearing in the record, so there's no additional testimony will be entered unless you choose to call for a public hearing. So the subject property, again, is noted on the overhead. There's residential development surrounding on about 3 sides, and then there's the church immediately to the south. Property was previously heavily treed. The trees were removed some time ago before the application was submitted, and there's a drainage way that traverses the property I'll talk about more in detail. I should note, excuse me, Basically, there are two streets, one that stubs to the property on the north side, Buell, and then there's a street to the east, Northeast Hoffman Drive, that intersects Newby Street on the east side of the subject property. So some of the applications you see include plan developments. This is not a plan development. It's strictly a zone change application, a subdivision application. So those are essentially independent decisions. The map on the left for the zone change proposal shows you the existing zoning. The property is currently zoned R1, which is what's basically located to the west, south, and to the northeast. Property to the north is zoned R2, and then there's property to the east zoned R3. Further to the south, there's some R4 zoning. This would change the zoning to R3, which would be contiguous with a portion of the R3 zoning that's located to the east. So you'd have that kind of salmon colored boundary would be extended across Newby to this property. The applicable criteria, there are provisions in the zoning ordinance that deals with zone changes, as well as goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, which are independent approval criteria for all land use applications. So there are essentially the three criteria you see above. Put an asterisk after the second one because there's some language in the ordinance that says basically, if the proposed amendment concerns needed housing as defined in the comprehensive plan and state statute, then that criterion doesn't apply to the rezoning of land designated for residential use. And it also specifies that the housing policies of the comprehensive plan are given added emphasis to make sure that any applications are being applied in a way that doesn't exclude needed housing, unnecessarily decrease densities, or allow conditions that would be attached that have the effect of discouraging needed housing. So when we look at the definition of needed housing in the state statute, it pertains to most of the housing we see, which is attached and detached single-family housing as part of that definition, which is what's proposed to be developed on the property. So essentially those criteria, we strike B and we're looking at the first one, A and C is the applicable criteria. So as we look at the criteria, the comprehensive plan, primarily what we're looking at there are some policies that deal with when you're zoning properties for R3 zoning or R4 zoning that are, sometimes it'll refer to the zone, sometimes it'll talk about medium density zoning or high density zoning. There are some policies that focus on where those zoning districts are to be located. There are some policies that apply in terms of looking at services and the ability of the transportation system to appropriately serve new development that would result from the zoning. So I'll talk the arrow notes. I'll talk about the locational considerations on the next couple slides. There are really no issues in terms of the transportation system. I can talk further about that as well. There are detailed findings in the staff report and decision document on that. We had no service issues identified in terms of being able to provide service to the property for the intended use. So essentially, there's one set of policies that deals with locations for both medium and high density. It talks about kind of those bullet pointed items at the bottom. It should be in areas that aren't committed to low density, areas where there's access to collector and arterial streets, areas that don't have significant limitations to develop to those higher densities that would be allowed, adequate capacity of facilities, and then proximity to public transportation within a quarter mile, and the opportunities to buffer from low-density residential areas. Essentially, with the zoning, and then again with the subdivision application, I'll talk about a little bit more what's proposed with the R3 zoning would allow for somewhat higher density than what's proposed. So the development plan does provide for some transition from the abutting type of development to what's proposed. The policies that are specific to the R3 or medium density which apply are noted on the overhead. So again, it looks at areas where there has been historically medium and high density zoning, similar to what we see to the east. Again, addresses topography, capacity of services, proximity to transit, proximity to services, commercial types of services or neighborhood services, and then proximity to public open space. And so there is some analysis in the staff report about the proximity to all of those things as well. So the Planning Commission found the applicable criteria were satisfied per the findings in the decision document and recommended approval. And so we're carrying that recommendation forward to the approval as recommended by the Planning Commission. And I'll come back, I'll go ahead and talk about the subdivision application and come back to and just to summarize the two decisions or recommendations after I complete that too. So the subdivision, again, it's a 17-lot subdivision. This, as proposed, it would be all single-family lots except for the two that are highlighted. Lots 4 and 5 would be essentially a common wall, two homes that have a common wall between them, but on separate lots. The street configuration essentially is in that L configuration to connect the street stub from Buell Drive to extend over to the intersection of Hoffman Street where it intersects Newby. And then lot 13 is highlighted on this map just to note that essentially all of the lots would have access from a public street other than that lot, which would take easement access across lot 14, which is permitted. There will be a little bit of discussions about some of the drainage and utility plans. You can see on this, on the overhead, there's the easement access to lot 13 would also be a storm drain easement that would convey drainage that is piped to the west side of the property about where lot 12 is, and take what is now an open drainage course that crosses the property from where that pipe ends and where it connects to a culvert over on Newby Street. This would reroute that and pipe it to that point of connection, and I'll show some illustrations of that. The applicable criteria for the subdivision are essentially that it meets all the land division standards, so that deals with things like the street standards, street connectivity, block length and perimeters, lot sizes, access, just the configuration of the lots and the improvements. We look at the development standards of the zoning district to make sure all the lot sizes are met, that it's consistent with the density provisions, and that development can reasonably develop on the proposed lots consistent with the things like setback standards that would apply when someone would come in for a building permit. And then again, the goals and policies in the comprehensive plan apply, and those deal predominantly with the issues identified on the overhead in terms of density, preservation of natural features, provision that addresses developers offering a certain number of lots for sale to people who might want to purchase a lot to develop their own home. So there's a lot sales policy that's addressed with a condition. And then again, some of those policies that deal with street connectivity and the transportation system plan in more detail. So this map illustrates on the subject property, you can see everything that's shown in red is essentially piped storm drainage. And you can see that essentially everything kind of to the west of the property, both northwest and southwest, all eventually gets piped and then discharges into that property where it's conveyed across it in an open channel. That goes back into a culvert where it's piped about another 200 feet on the east side of Newby Street. And then it opens up again and daylights into the drainage way that continues back up to the river, and you'll see downstream a number of other storm drain pipes that discharge into that open drainage way that leads to the river. So on this map, you can see the highlighted property to the left side of the site, and you can see essentially where the drainage way is conveyed through mostly backyards in developed areas until it hits that tributary and then continues up to the river. So this is essentially the last upstream segment of the drainage way that isn't piped. And again, there's a portion of that that already extends piped for about another 200 feet east of Newby Street. So as we looked at some of the issues kind of relating to preservation of natural features versus the existing conditions, our recommendation was that as that last upstream piece of property that's already between two pipe segments, that that would be acceptable as long as it met the requirements for a drainage plan. And key note is the applicant did go through a wetland determination on the property. There was a wetland identified in the National Wetland Inventory, so they did their wetland delineation and determination, found that a small portion, about it's 0.07 acres, is actually designated as waters of the state, but not didn't exhibit wetland characteristics, but it's still jurisdictional waters that would be subject to permitting through the Department of State Lands and U.S. Corps of Engineers to do off-site mitigation that would disturb the natural course or the open drainage way. So the first condition in the subdivision decision is the applicant would need to obtain those permits and demonstrate that that could be satisfied before anything else happens. The Corps and DSL, as part of their mitigation requirements, do require them to demonstrate whether it's feasible or not to maintain those features on site rather than mitigate off site. So if that condition can't be met through those permitting agencies, then that's the first big step that would have to happen before anything else could move forward. So the other issues are largely addressed with fairly standard conditions in terms of permitting and construction requirements that apply to standard subdivisions with no major issues that can't be addressed with standard conditions. I wanted to provide a summary of some of the public testimony that was presented at the Planning Commission meeting. That's summarized in the minutes that are in Exhibit 4, Attachment 4 in the staff report in your packet. Those are the draft minutes. They haven't gone back to the Planning Commission for their final approval yet. But these were we had 2 or 3 abutting property owners provide testimony at the Planning Commission hearing. And these are a summary of the issues. There were some concerns about traffic safety on Buell and Grand Haven at the intersection. It's right across from the driveway at the school that's used for buses, and there's a lot of drop off there for kids. I talked with Mike, and he said they'd actually had talked with one of the property owners who was concerned about the visibility and the additional traffic up there. That was already a concern for them whether or not the subdivision materialized. And Mike said they had gone out and either completed or were in the process of painting some of the curbs near the intersection for no parking to improve visibility. So independent of this application, that issue's been looked at as well. Some of the residents requested that the drainage way be kept open rather than piping, and that the subdivision be reconfigured to keep the open drainage way. They expressed some concerns about what would happen in terms of approval of a stormwater, basically the engineered stormwater management plan that would pipe that, and what the implications would be for downstream impacts if that would increase velocities or erosion, things like that. There was interest expressed, and we do have some policies that address passive solar access to lots and subdivisions that basically encourages streets to be located in east-west orientation. So you have lots that are deeper north to south to provide greater solar access. And again, there was the kind of the trade-off of how do you provide for street connectivity and good solar access. And we did have the connection from Buell to Hoffman Street, and that was actually a connection specifically identified in the street connectivity element of the transportation system plan. So that was sort of a balancing act where about half of the street was oriented east-west, and then it turned in that L configuration to connect the street. So you don't have all of the lots oriented to the north-south, and sometimes in larger subdivisions where you have the opportunity to lay out a big street grid, there's a choice of, do you lay the streets out east-west or north-south with those blocks and those lot configurations, where there's a little more flexibility in doing that. So in this case, it's a fairly constrained lot in terms of trying to achieve that and street connectivity. Finally, there were some concerns about privacy and screening. Some of the residents had become accustomed to the natural wooded condition of the lot and the privacy and screening that afforded from adjoining streets. And with the lot cleared and with new homes going in, there was some concern about headlights and views from backyards and things like that. So that's kind of a summary of the testimony that was presented. During that testimony, there was a request from one of the residents to the Planning Commission asking them to require that a vegetation screen be provided at the perimeter around the subdivision adjacent to existing homes. There were 2 conditions requested dealing just specifically with the construction phase, requesting that there be temporary privacy fencing during construction and that primary construction access be from Newby rather than Buell. And essentially, the Planning Commission found the criteria for the subdivision were satisfied with the conditions that were already identified absent those additional conditions, so they recommended approval with conditions. They indicated interest in some of those other issues that came up during the hearing, but didn't find that those would be required to meet the applicable criteria. But staff did contact the applicant regarding those following the hearing, and the applicant concurred that they would be willing to meet a condition voluntarily regarding primary construction access off Newby Street. And so the decision document in front of you reflects the Planning Commission's recommendation, plus that additional condition that was essentially agreed to by the applicant on a voluntary basis. And so the Planning Commission found the applicable criteria were satisfied with the conditions in the decision document. And our recommendation is approval with conditions per the decision document, which reflects the Planning Commission's recommendation, as well as the additional condition on the overhead that deals with primary construction access from Newby rather than Buell, but it also recognizes that there will need to be some access to Buell to basically connect, extend the utility services and construct the road connection there. So again, in summary, the 2 applications, the recommendation is to approve the zone change, Ordinance 5081, and the recommendation on the subdivision, Ordinance 5082, is to approve it with conditions as noted in the decision document. And that condition I noted is already reflected in the decision document. So that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions you have before deliberations.
Any questions of Tom?
Yeah, Tom, really excellent job of putting the report together. The only question I had was about the privacy screening to the adjacent properties. You mentioned that the Planning Commission found that all the criteria were satisfied and they didn't seem to feel a need to add those 2 of the 3 conditions that, including that privacy screening. Is that an unusual request?
You know, I don't have a lot of history with that here. I believe one of the residents that asked for that had indicated that was something that had occurred in another subdivision. I don't know that it was a condition of approval or something that the developer chose to do as a courtesy. We don't have those kind of code provisions that deal with putting up that type of fencing during the construction phase. And so I hadn't seen that one before.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, when you guys went back and asked the developer for that construction access going off Newby, did you guys bring up that vegetation? Were they interested in doing that, even though we can't require it? Was that conversation had?
That was the only of the conditions that they had agreed that they would volunteer to provide.
Okay.
The street access?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
The others were mentioned as well, but that was the one that they concurred with.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none. What I'm going to do is ask for a first reading, and then we'll talk about in deliberations after that whether we're going to seek for a public hearing or we have enough to move forward. So what I'd do is ask we already asked you if we could move to a first reading. I didn't do that. So would the city attorney please read the ordinances into the record?
Okay. This is a first reading of ordinance number 5081, an ordinance amending the zoning map designation from R1 single-family residential to R3 two-family residential on a 2.93 acre site. We'll also do first reading of ordinance number 5082, an ordinance approving a tentative plan for a 17-lot subdivision on a 2.93 acre site.
Thank you, David. The council now has the opportunity to schedule a public hearing on these ordinances or ask for a second reading. What would your pleasure be to do on this? We'll just open it up for discussion and go ahead, Sal.
Yeah, I'm curious, are there any opponents of this project here tonight? Okay. So I'd be inclined to move forward with it since there's not, I mean, usually these kinds of projects, it seems to me, if there's a lot of neighborhood opposition, people show up and make that pretty clear, and I don't see anybody here.
And it seemed to resolve most of those issues in the planning commission. Okay.
Were the three opponents, was that the only testimony that you guys received is what I read in the packet, was those three individuals?
That's my recollection, is there was one property owner with property to the west, and then two property owners that spoke that owned property immediately to the north. I think those were the only ones I recall that spoke.
Okay, the neighborhood meeting said there's 24 people in attendance, and so with only three speaking in opposition, it made it seem like it's not a very contested subdivision.
I would suggest that we move forward.
Yeah,
So it's been moved and seconded. So we will ask for a second reading on ordinance 5081.
I need a vote to move.
Okay.
I move to,
Okay, so we moved and seconded.
I second.
Kelly and Remy seconded. All those in favor, please.
I'm sorry, just for the record, I need a separate motion for 5081 and for 5082.
Okay, so I think we'll go through 5081 first.
Okay.
And so this is for 5081, and I have Kelly moved and
I'll
Remy
move,
seconded.
and I'll move to approve 5082.
and also,
We'll do that.
One at a time.
Oh, we got to vote in each one.
Okay,
Man,
so
screwing it up tonight.
all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
aye.
Any opposed, signify by saying nay. Okay, that passes unanimously. And so I'll ask the city attorney to give a second reading of ordinance 5081.
Okay. So this is the second reading of ordinance number 5081, an ordinance amending the zoning map designation from R1 single-family residential to R3 two-family residential on a 2.93 acre site.
Thank you, David. I'll ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 5081.
I so moved, or seconded, whatever.
Okay, so Remy moved and Kelly seconded. I'll ask the city recorder to poll the council.
Counselor Drobkin?
Aye.
Counselor Garvin?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Counselor Peralta?
Aye.
Council President Minke?
Aye.
Okay. The motion passes unanimously. Ordinance number 5081 again is passed unanimously. This is going to now take us to a vote 5-0. Excuse me. Takes us to ordinance number 5082, and we'll ask for a second reading on 5082.
So this is a,
First.
We'll have a vote first. So
yeah, let's have a
motion
vote first, yeah, thanks.
And move to approve 5082.
Second.
Okay, so Remy and Sal, go ahead. David, if you would
All in favor?
read by,
Hold on, we need a vote on that.
okay. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ordinance number 5082 moves to a second reading, 5-0.
Okay, so this is a second reading of ordinance number 5082 for the record. An ordinance approving a tentative plan for a 17-acre, a tentative plan for a 17-lot subdivision on a 2.93-acre site.
Thank you, David. This is the second reading of 5082. I'll ask for a motion to adopt the ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Sal, seconded by Kelly. I'll ask the city recorder to poll the council.
Counselor Drapkin?
Aye.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Counselor Garvin?
Aye.
Counselor Peralta?
Aye.
Council President Menke?
Aye.
Ordinance number 5082 is adopted unanimously with a 5-0. That takes care of our meeting tonight. So
I have one question while Tom's there. It didn't sway my vote, so I didn't bring it up earlier, but there was a question about the solar access of the development in the houses. And the way I read the comp plan, there's number 87 and then number 179, number 4, both refer to solar orientation and its importance in reviewing a development. Do we care about those two things?
It's sort of balancing that with providing the street connection as it was proposed, which was actually that L-shaped connection was identified in the transportation system plan as a specific connection too. Okay. So we got about half the subdivision that had solar orientation, and absent doing something that would not connect those streets, we wouldn't be able to do more to achieve that with the street configuration.
Okay. The sustainability model is really important, but we've talked about this at Water and Light quite a bit, that right now the feasibility of solar on homes is so cost prohibitive because of the cost of our electricity, and that you have to have grants to be able to do that. It makes it very difficult. We just don't have many coming and asking for that, but I know you guys are very involved in that type of a scenario. Any thoughts from that perspective?
Yeah, I feel strongly that renewables are more of a moral imperative and less of an economical case, but.
Okay.
So the east-west streets maximize the north-south orientation of lots. Again, in a larger subdivision where you have a bigger grid to put together, you can sort of pick and choose. Do you want to have those lots oriented east-west or north-south? In this case, with that street connection, if you wanted to connect those, then it was a half and half, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, Zach. I will go ahead and adjourn our meeting this evening. Thank you.